Hey everyone, Kurt Outdoors here. I'm in Welland, Ontario, but the focus of this video is actually 30 kilometers away in that direction near the Grand River. I'll come back to this spot later in the video and show you how it's related to the Grand River. I hope you watch the video until the end because it's quite an interesting piece of the history of the area and shows how things came to be and how they disappeared. So this whole story begins about 200 years ago with the building of the first Welland Canal in 1829. They wanted to get ships from Lake Ontario to Lake Erie without having to portage around Niagara Falls, and a local businessman and politician named William Hamilton Merritt proposed a canal using 12 Mile Creek and the Welland River as a basis for the route. So here's the route that was planned. Once they got up to the Welland River using a series of locks, then they would progress up the Niagara River to Lake Erie, thereby bypassing Niagara Falls. Now zooming in a bit on the same area, in between Allenburg and Port Robinson, when they were digging the canal, they ran into a problem. There's a height of land in between these points that had to be cut through, like 20 meters deep. So as they were almost completing the deep cut channel, it collapsed and killed a number of workers. They realized that they couldn't complete the cut and would not be able to get water from the Welland River. They needed a higher source of water. So I'm going to pan over to the west slightly and show the rest of the Welland River here. Now at the same time as the collapse of the channel, they were also building a canal to join the Grand River to the Welland River here. So they then decided to change the direction of this canal and turn it into a feeder canal to supply water for the high spot on the Welland Canal, since the Grand River was higher than the Welland River. This is the route the feeder canal took to feed the water to the Welland Canal, which then enabled all the locks to be filled with enough water supply. Okay, so you can also see that the source of the feeder canal was coming from the mouth of the Grand River, but since the War of 1812 was still on everyone's mind, they decided to dam the Grand River 8 kilometers upstream for safety instead of at the mouth, and bring a canal down from Dunnville, which wasn't even a town then, to meet the feeder canal that they had been working on. That is why the canal goes south first and then makes an abrupt change in direction and heads east. The dam also raised the water level by about 9 feet and gave them the extra water height that they needed. The Welland Canal then opened in 1829. This water route is generally considered the first Welland Canal. The Welland Canal was a success, but the Welland River and the Niagara River section was seen as inconvenient and difficult. So in 1833, they added an extension here from the feeder canal to Lake Erie. Then they wouldn't have to go up the Niagara River anymore. They also widened the part of the first canal feeder section for boats and created a junction lock right here. And this is the lock right here. So here we are in Welland again, and this is the feature from the beginning of the video, and it's actually the filled-in remains of the 1833 lock from the feeder canal into the old Welland Canal. This was where the junction was, and over there is the second Welland Canal. It's not used anymore. If you look from above, you can see the door pockets where they would retract the doors and lower the boats into the Welland Canal. There's the old hinges for the doors. Thousands of ships came through here 200 years ago. Finally, in 1845, they added another extension here at the mouth of the Grand River in order to directly access Lake Erie from the feeder canal. They also added 2 locks, one at Dunnville and another at Port Maitland, to allow shipping into the Grand River or Lake Erie. These changes were all considered part of the second Welland Canal. So here's one of the last remaining original sections of the first Welland Canal. It's made out of stone blocks because that was an improvement for the second Welland Canal, which used the same route. But the original Welland Canal would have been made of wood. Here I am in Waynfleet, which is one of the little towns that was sprung up due to this canal. So this little road here is called Feeder Lane, and it's actually the old towpath from 150 years ago. That's where they used to pull the barges on this road here, on this little path. It's all concrete. So at the same time the feeder canal was being built, William Hamilton Merritt again and another politician businessman named David Thompson came up with an idea to build a series of locks and dams on the Grand River to get people and goods from Lake Erie up to Brantford. So they formed the Grand River Navigation Company in 1832 and began making plans. One problem they had was that all of these locks were on Indian territory, specifically 6 nations of the Grand River. This land was given to them under the Haldimand Proclamation of 1784 by the Crown for their loyalty to the British during the American Revolution. 10 kilometers on either side of the Grand River for the entire length belonged to the 6 nations. So they started building the locks and canals anyway, but the financing for it was very controversial. Trust funds that were allocated to the 6 nations Haudenosaunee and some of their land was diverted into the company without their consent. They ended up owning about 80% of the company. So all 5 locks and dams were completed between Cayuga and Caledonia by 1836, with a total rise of 43 feet. Each lock was 115 feet long, 32 feet wide, and about 3 feet deep, with a rise of 9 feet. So now I'll show you where these canals and locks were located. So here's the mansion Ruthven, which was built around the 1840s, and it was built by David Thompson, who was one of the main investors and promoters of the Grand River Navigation Company. Some people don't like him very much, especially the 6 nations, because this is one of the main guys apparently that swindled them out of their trust fund. But what a beautiful mansion this is. Very scenic. So I'm just getting out to take a look where the canal came out. See if there's anything left. Oh, there's still some water in the canal, actually. Look at that, way up there. You can see the remnants of it. The locks would have been right here. Very little left. So here we are at the town of York, and the canal would have come straight through here. Right where I'm standing right now would be the canal. And you can see the rise in the water there where the rapids are. That's where the dam was, right there. So they blocked the river right there, and they came straight through where these trees are here. Now there's nothing left. Well, I'm in the lock. Probably the last boat that's been in here in 150 years. Well, this is all that's left at Sims Locks. Steamboats would come down here this way, and they would pass out through there. They used to have towpaths along the entire length of this canal. And here's one of the bridges that was used by the horses to pull the boats up the river, because they had to cross this little river here. There's not even a river here anymore because they moved it that way in the approximate location of where the mill was and the locks were. But this was a towpath bridge here. The horses would cross this bridge and keep going. There they have a provision for a boat lock for the future in case they want to continue with navigation one day. The 5 locks only got them to Canesville, which is located here, but they wanted to get all the way into downtown Brantford. So in 1848, they completed what was called the Brantford Cut, which was another canal and 3 locks that got them all the way into downtown Brantford. The town was then designated as an inland port in 1852, and it still is today, even though the canal system is long gone. Here is where the locks were located. The canal and locks were useful in helping to populate the Grand River Valley by creating towns and businesses along the river that are still there today, but it faced many obstacles and was never profitable for a number of reasons, such as spring flooding, which damaged the locks, poorly built locks made of wood, and of course the coming of the railway in 1854. Operations ceased in 1871 and was sold to the Haldimand Navigation Company, and they also abandoned the canal, except for the 3 Brantford locks portion that we just looked at in Canesville, which was sold to a man named Alfred Watts in 1875 for $1. The Six Nations lost every penny of their investment, which they wanted no part of in the first place. Their trust fund was gone. The last boat made a trip through the locks in 1890. So what did Alfred Watts do with the canal section that he bought for $1? Well, he built a hydroelectric generating station by diverting water that used to flow through the abandoned locks, and he was able to supply Brantford with 895 kilowatts of power from 1885 to 1911, until Ontario Hydro came along and he could no longer compete. He had to shut down the facility, and the ruins are still here to this day. So this is where the water intake was. He dammed it up over here, had a big deep pool here, and sucked the water in here. Just go take a look. Look at that, man. Well, that's the end of the line for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. So I came across this old map from the 1800s, and the Mohawk Chapel, which is the oldest church in Ontario, is located right here at the bend in this oxbow. So people would come to church using the river, but looking at a modern view, you can see the oxbow at some point was bypassed and the river was straightened, so it no longer flows by the church. People then came to church by road. So this was the front face of the church until 1829, because it faced the Grand River at that time. Behind those trees used to be the Grand River, but now the oxbow changed its course and it broke through part of the oxbow. And the portion of the river where the Indians used to paddle their canoes to get to this church, it's all dried up now because the river changed its course. Here's another interesting site along the banks of the Grand River. This was Chief George Johnson of the Six Nations, Mohawks. This was his house. He built it in from 1853 to 1856. And his daughter grew up here, and she was a famous Canadian poet, Pauline Johnson. And what's unique about this house, it had two front entrances, one facing the road, which is this side, and the other side was to face the river, to welcome people in canoes coming from the other side of the building. I believe this external building was the kitchen, summer kitchen. This is the side that faces the river. There was probably a view of the river years ago. I think my parents took a tour of this place. I'm pretty sure they give tours. But what a nice old place.